institutions is through transparency. If the people know what's really going on, we wouldn't allow many of these things to happen. The reason they do happen is because we don't know. I had asked that we put all of our open records online. The way it is at UT Austin at the time, and many of our institutions, is you would make an open records request, we'd have a back and forth, we give you something goes to the AG says, no, you can't send that out, and then it goes in a physical file, and then it's buried in files, and it's very difficult to get information. So I had the idea, which certainly doesn't seem like rocket science, that we put all of our open records online, that it's digital, that when you ask for something, it goes online, it goes to the website, and anybody else who wants to see it can see it, they can search for it, they can download whatever it is that she received in her request. I've been working on that since February of 2012. I've been promised for years that it's going to be done. It's still not done. But I asked, I said, why can't we do it? And they said, well, we don't know how big the problem is. I said, well, who's got the most open records on the academic side of the house? They said, UT Austin. I said, well, let me see how much it is. So that was the process by which I started reviewing existing open records files. I didn't make any open records requests at the time. I reviewed what was there. And what I found was disturbing. And it had to do with the law school. It had to do with a sham investigation that we conducted, that the AG had blessed, that turned out not to be true. Ultimately, we got to the bottom of it and we got the problem fixed. But when this happened, the last kind of nail in my coffin, as far as some of the politicians were concerned, is when I made a request for communication between the president and the politicians, which I'll come back to. But when this happened, some of the most powerful politicians in the state came after me. Former Governor David Dewhurst, Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, former Chair of Appropriations Jim Pitts, another Republican, former Chair of Higher Education Dan Branch, another Republican, aspiring AG, former Chair of Higher Education Democrat Judith Zaffirini, the Queen Bee of the Senate, and the current Chair of Higher Ed in the Senate, Kel Seliger from West Texas. They came after me, they attacked my integrity, they attacked my business ethics, my children. They trolled Dallas in search of dirt on me and my family. They lied about my conduct as a regent. Anonymous bloggers spewed their hatred and disdain on numerous websites and UT-centric blogs, and I received some very aggressive emails from people in the community. These politicians threatened me with impeachment. One of Dan Flynn's committee members, Representative Lyle Larson, another Republican from San Antonio, another one of Joe Strauss's lieutenants, even threatened me with an FBI investigation if I wouldn't resign. And this was prior to their hearings on me. The liberal press in Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth, and Houston were quick to jump on the bandwagon. They wrote numerous editorials demanding my resignation, demanding that the governor request my resignation. The Houston Chronicle even did it 2 days in a row, which has to be a record. The leadership of the Texas Exodus, our 100,000 strong alumni group association, and other close allies like former U.S. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, abused their positions to hide their knowledge and involvement in the wrongdoing and improper admissions practices by attacking me with falsehoods and lies. The establishment politicians and the politically well-connected formed an Orwellian organization called the Texas Coalition for Excellence in Higher Education, whose sole purpose was to oppose the reforms that we were trying to implement. They engaged a professional PR firm to orchestrate the media plan and the attacks. My goals when I came on were accessibility, affordability, improving quality, and lowering student debt loads. And this is what they were opposed to. Now, I added transparency once I understood how important it was, and they didn't like that either. UT Austin student body leadership held a vote of no confidence, which I think was the first time in university history, claiming the same falsehoods put forth by Dan Flynn's committee. Even the chairman of our board, Paul Foster from El Paso, ambushed me at a public meeting at the end of the meeting and asked me to resign for the good of the system after complimenting me as the hardest working member of the board and for my contributions to the state. Go figure. You have to ask yourself, what were these people so afraid of? Is transparency to the people of Texas really so frightening? Transparency, honesty and accounting, following the rules, fair admissions processes for all Texans. Maybe it's frightening if you have something to hide, which we now know they did. In response to all this, Joe Strauss created a quasi-judiciary committee for the purpose of threatening and intimidating appointees to our state boards, like me and the others on the UT System Board. He chose Representative Dan Flynn and another Democrat, I believe it was Carol Alvarado from Houston, to chair this group. Strauss described it as experimental committee. In early June of 2013, I used the Texas Public Information Act and made a request to UT Austin for all communications between Bill Powers and the politicians. This legal and appropriate request ignited Jim Pitts, the chair of appropriations, and he said within 21 days brought impeachment charges against me. It was way over the edge, and I had suspected what was going on. I couldn't get to the bottom of it. I knew when I did it, it was going to be incendiary, if in fact they were doing what I thought. Speaker Joe Strauss has been publicly quoted that he instigated the impeachment process against me to, quote, protect his members. What in the world does that mean? I think I know what it means. I think we all know what he meant, and I took him at his word. He was there to protect the members of the Texas House of Representatives from being disclosed for whatever it is they had done, which included Dan Flynn and himself from being held accountable through transparency. Dan Flynn said, as Texans advocates for more open government, we are ready to shine a bright light onto Texas government. This is what he said at the beginning. As Texans advocates for more open government, we are ready to shine a bright light onto Texas government. His committee was empowered to look into legislative malfeasance, yet he chose not to. In fact, he facilitated the bad actors' efforts to hide in the shadows and conceal their involvement. In pursuing me, they asked for any concerns I and others had that we thought they should investigate. Dan Flynn's chief of staff, David Aronach, I can't pronounce his last name, he said recently that I had provided nothing to the committee. I hadn't contributed to the committee when they asked. Really? In my August 2013 letter to Dan Flynn and Carol Alvarado, the chairs of the committee at the beginning of the process, I asked through my attorney for 4 areas of inquiry requiring the committee's attention. 1, to investigate the secret favoritism in faculty compensation. 2, to investigate the secret favoritism in admissions and influence peddling among the politicians and others. 3, the systemic inflation and misreporting of gift giving. And 4, the lack of compliance and transparency consistent with the Texas Public Information Act, which guarantees the public's access to information about our government. I submitted over 30,000 emails for their review. What did they look into from my list? What questions did they ask? Nothing, not one. It was reminiscent of the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter or a communist show trial. Why didn't they? It's a question I would have asked Representative Flynn had he shown up. I was denied the right to counsel in his transparency impeachment committee. I was denied the ability to cross witnesses, unable to call witnesses, unable to place evidence into the record, or to participate in secret pre-hearing interviews their attorney Rusty Hardin conducted with my accusers, so the committee and my accusers could get their stories straight before they went before the public. They needed to know what questions to ask, and they needed to know which questions to avoid. Worst of all, I requested that Representative Dan Flynn subpoena me, like every other witness in the UT system, so I could answer their questions fully. I asked for the opportunity to come and answer their questions, all of their questions, under oath and under penalty of perjury, but was denied. When I wouldn't appear without a subpoena, Dan Flynn called it a slap in the face to the Texas House of Representatives. I call what Dan Flynn did a gross abuse of his power and a kick in the teeth to all Texans who are the rightful owners of our government. Mr. Flynn and his committee paraded everyone through the hearings that might have something bad to say about me or my actions. He would then take his committee behind closed doors to discuss and vote in secret. Some transparency, huh? Does that remind you of how Washington, D.C. operates? Closed doors, secret testimony, can't get emails or access, no true accountability. Dan Flynn spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of state funds paying a Houston's plaintiff's attorney to trump up allegations and charges against me that Dan Flynn knew were untrue. He knew it. His individual efforts to bully and intimidate a private citizen, an unpaid volunteer who had a fiduciary sworn obligation to the people of Texas, I think was despicable. I chose impeachment over acquiescence